Late Saturday night, early Sunday. Rayshard Brooks is the latest African-American man to have the last few moments of his life videotaped and to have his killing by Atlanta police videotaped. All right, digitally recorded. I don't know why I keep saying videotape. You know what I mean. Anyway, what I have to share with you as the first part of our program tonight is a chronology of those last moments of Rayshard Brooks' life. The Atlanta Police Department said early Sunday that an officer had been fired over the fatal shooting of Rayshard Brooks, who was 27, at a Wendy's restaurant here in Atlanta. The officer, Garrett Rolfe, who had worked with the department since 2013, fired his handgun 3 times while he was chasing Mr. Brooks, who had seized a taser from an officer and fired it as he ran. Another officer on the scene, Devin Brosnan, who has been with the department for less than 2 years, was placed on administrative duty. 3 experts for the New York Times analyzed eyewitness videos, police body cam footage, and security camera footage of the events to determine what happened in those last minutes of Mr. Brooks' life. And then these 3 experts, Malachi Brown, Christina Kelso, and Barbara Marcolini, put together a chronology, which I'm going to share with you. And it uses verifiable timestamps on the video that was shot, the police body camera, the dash camera. There's plenty of video in this one, trust me. So here's a detailed breakdown of what happened. It was 10:33 p.m. on Friday. Atlanta police were called to a Wendy's restaurant in South Atlanta. Mr. Brooks had fallen asleep in his vehicle, which was parked in the drive-through lane, which was causing other customers to drive around him. That's according to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. That's what their initial statement said. Officer Brosnan says, "All right, you good? Just pull in somewhere and take it. All right, you good?" Mr. Brooks parks in a nearby car space. Officer Brosnan appears to be unsure whether he should let Mr. Brooks sleep in the car or should take further action. So at 10:49 p.m., Officer Brosnan contacts police dispatch and requests another police officer. 7 minutes later, at 10:56 p.m., Officer Rolfe arrives and consults with Officer Brosnan. Officer Rolfe questions Mr. Brooks, who says he didn't drive to Wendy's but was dropped off. Officer Rolfe rejects the statement. At 11:04 p.m., 8 minutes later, Officer Rolfe performs a sobriety test on Mr. Brooks over the next 7 minutes. Mr. Brooks is compliant and friendly with the officers throughout this time. He says he is not too drunk to drive. Officer Rolfe then asks Mr. Brooks to take a breath test for alcohol. Mr. Brooks admits he has been drinking, but he says, quote, "I don't want to refuse anything," end quote. Mr. Brooks asks the officers if he can lock his car up under their supervision and walk to his sister's house, which he says is a short distance away. Mr. Brooks says, quote, "I can just go home," end quote. At 11:23 p.m., the 2 officers have been at the scene for 27 minutes. When the breath test is complete, Officer Rolfe tells Mr. Brooks that he, Brooks, quote, "has had too much drink to be driving," end quote, and begins to handcuff him. Less than a minute later, Mr. Brooks is shot. Now, police footage and video filmed by a witness shows Mr. Brooks grappling with the officers on the ground. Officer Rolfe says, "Stop that, stop fighting, stop fighting." And Officer Brosnan shouts, "You're going to get tased." Mr. Brooks says, "Mr. Rolfe, come on, man, Mr. Rolfe." He seizes a taser from Officer Brosnan, stands up, and punches Officer Rolfe. Officer Rolfe fires his taser gun. The darts hit Mr. Brooks, and Officer Rolfe continues trying to stun him. Mr. Brooks runs away, holding Officer Brosnan's taser gun. Officer Rolfe gives change and continues to try to stun Mr. Brooks. The security camera footage filmed at Wendy's shows Officer Rolfe chasing Mr. Brooks. In seconds, Officer Rolfe passes his taser from his right hand to his left hand and reaches for his handgun. While being chased and in full stride, Mr. Brooks looks behind him, points the taser he is holding in Officer Rolfe's direction, and fires it. The flash of the taser suggests that Mr. Brooks did not fire it with any real accuracy. Officer Rolfe discards the taser he's carrying, draws his handgun, and fires it 3 times at Mr. Brooks as he is running away. Mr. Brooks falls to the ground. 11:23. For the next minute, Officer Rolfe and Officer Brosnan stand over Mr. Brooks, who is injured but moving on the ground, and occasionally they reach down to him. Officer Brosnan appears to use his radio. Neither officer appears to provide medical assistance to Mr. Brooks. Another police car arrives at the scene. 11:24 p.m. Another video shows Officer Rolfe running back to his SUV and calling for help over his radio. Bystanders denounce the shooting to a third police officer who is at the scene. 11:25 p.m. Officer Rolfe and Officer Brosnan begin to provide medical assistance. Officer Rolfe appears to unroll a bandage and place it on Mr. Brooks' torso. 11:30 p.m. An ambulance arrives. 8 minutes later, Mr. Brooks is taken to a hospital where he dies after surgery. Now, you can watch the entirety of this video as put together by these 3 video experts. All you have to do is go to nytimes.com, and I think the Sunday edition, I believe, will have the full video, and it's very clear. There's no doubt about what happened. The questions that I think any rational person immediately has is, the man is running away. Rayshard Brooks is running away. How many times has this happened? The black man is running away. Is there something? Now, I'm serious here. I'm serious. Is there something in black men that says when you are confronted with a white man with a gun, run? Is there something in white men when a black man runs away and you have a gun that says shoot him? I'm serious. Every time I see a scene like this, and how many times has this happened now, where we white people could look at it and marvel and come to whatever conclusion we want, but our conclusions don't mean shit. They really don't mean shit. The black man is running away. The white man shoots him, kills him. And every single time I see one of these, I can't help it. It makes me think of black slaves in the 1840s, running away from the overseer out in the field. I mean, goddamn, I have lived in the South for half a century. I see places where this shit really happened. I can go to parts of Charleston, parts of Richmond, parts of Savannah, suburban Atlanta. I can go to these places. And if the light is right, if it's just before dusk, and I'm in a certain place where there was a plantation, or there was a rice paddy, or there was a cotton field, I can hear this shit. Now, you say what you want. I don't care. Say what you want. But that's how I was able to write some of the scenes in the book, Colored Ice Cream. I hear this stuff. I can go to these places. God damn, Malloy's completely wigged out. No. Call it my imagination. Call it anything you want. I really don't give a shit. I first noticed this when I lived in Richmond, Virginia, just south of Richmond, Virginia. I was driving one night on a public road through a cemetery in Richmond that contained the bodies of an awful lot of Union soldiers. And I'll be goddamned. I'll be goddamned if my headlights didn't pick up all kinds of shit moving alongside the road, moving in and out those big oak trees, moving underneath all that darkness and around those obelisks. Just my imagination, that's all. But I asked somebody about this. I asked a couple of somebodies later on, because when I saw the ghosts at the Richmond, Virginia Civil War Cemetery, I just thought they were ghosts. That's the only word I had, ghosts. But I asked my friend Steve Smith, years later, I said, I can go to these places, Steve. I see this shit. I feel this shit. I sense it. I smell it. I don't know what the fuck is going on. He said, man, those are haints. What? Haints. Those are haints, Malloy. A haint. I remember when Steve told me that. We're sitting there, and I said, a haint. He said, you people probably call it a haunt, but we call it haint, a haint. That's what you're seeing. That's what you are seeing, Mike. So when I saw the video of Rayshard Brooks running, trying to get away. I don't know if his sister lived a walking distance. I do know that his daughter, he had a little girl who was having a birthday the next day. Was it the next day? Jesus fucking Christ. This shit's got to stop. This shit's got to stop. This shit's got to stop. I mean, it has to stop. Hey, Truth Seekers, while we're practicing safe social distancing, it's a great time to treat yourself with some seriously delicious, responsibly sourced coffee. Awaken to pleasure with River Moon Coffee. But don't take my word for it. Here are two recent reviews. Quote, we sell River Moon Coffee at Marine General Store, and I can't seem to keep up with customer demand. Not only is the coffee excellent, but the philosophy behind it, the careful sourcing and constant research to bring a quality product to customers, appeals to the hearts of our community. End quote. And here's one from a fellow Malloy listener. Quote, I love this coffee. I buy it in 5-pound bags. I especially love the Truth Seeker blend. End quote. Sounds like they're planning ahead for the apocalypse. Anyway, support a progressive small business that supports this program. Go to MikeMalloy.com and click on the River Moon Coffee link on the main page. You'll thank me later.